morning and welcome into the show. It is Daniel Wortman coming to you live from the Dream Imaginate Sports Studios. It is 8 o'clock on the East Coast, 5 o'clock out west, and all time zones in between and around the world. Welcome into the show on this busy Monday morning. A lot going on. A lot that we're going to get to today. Coming up after the break, we are going to dig into some U.S. soccer and kind of macro, but also some specific issues. And so if you're curious as to why soccer in America isn't bigger than it is, if you're curious as to why there are issues when it comes to our ability to field world-class teams, to build world-class leagues, the reason why the sport isn't bigger than it is, if you're wondering, why you have to pay so much money for your kids to play, and yet players that play professional soccer aren't getting paid much more than that to play on a professional level. If you're wondering why everything is upside down and backwards, we're going to get into some of that today coming up after the break. So stay tuned. And some of that's going to include the bylaws and policy proposals that have been put forth by West Virginia and Illinois adult soccer. So that's coming up shortly here in just a few minutes. But before we do, I am a massive Barcelona fan, and if you've watched the show at all, you know this. I am a huge Barcelona fan. First and foremost, I like Liverpool in the Premier League, and they're having an amazing season, but they're having an amazing probably last 24 months. And as a Barcelona supporter, first and foremost, it's been a little painful when you compare the two, because for a long time, Barcelona was the gold standard of how to play. They didn't win everything every year. They won a lot, and they won a lot of trophies, but they were the gold standard of how to play. Beautiful soccer. And if you've watched Barcelona over the last couple seasons, it was just not that. Really, the last 2.5 seasons under Valverde, it was not that. But I actually go back farther. And for this, all of the success of Luis Enrique, he came in and righted the ship from the standpoint of post-Pep. So Pep leaves, his assistant takes over, Tito Villanova, who I think was on track to be Pep-esque in the way that he led. Everything seemed to point in that direction. They were playing very well under him. There was a renewed sense of energy, and then, he got struck with cancer again and fought it valiantly, but ultimately lost that fight and passed away. And after that, the club just didn't find the right footing. They brought in a few managers before Valverde, and Tata Martino was one of them. He was one season and done, just wasn't the right fit. Luis Enrique comes in, and he played okay from in terms of a beautiful style of football. It wasn't necessarily beautiful, but it was effective, and he also recognized at the time he had Messi, Suarez, and Neymar. Let me get the ball to them and get it to them as quickly as possible. So it was a lot of almost fast break soccer. But it wasn't totally away from, positional play, the juego de posición type of principles that really have guided the beautiful football of Barcelona. Getting into Valverde, this is where I look back to Enrique, because Enrique to me was the gateway to Valverde. It was this idea that we don't have to be as married to beautiful football. We don't have to be as married to positional play. We can be more direct. We can go faster. We can go quicker. And what happened is you bring in Valverde, and there just seemed to be no real, aggressive, beautiful positional play, incorporated tactical plan. It was very stale. There just was not a lot of combination play. The midfield was just, okay, not great. It sometimes just seemed like it was overrun. And when you have that kind of setup, then you start to rely more and more on what I call the hard workers. They may not be making the most intelligent decisions. They may not be the most skilled players or the flashiest players or playing the most beautiful soccer, but what they are is hardworking. You never doubt their effort. And so because you never doubt their effort, you applaud their work rate, and their job is basically like clean up, let's get the ball, let's see if we can find Messi, and maybe Messi can bail us out. And that was what seemed to be the tactical plan for Barcelona over the last few seasons, and it kept getting worse and worse and worse. And you saw in bigger and bigger matches where teams knew, hey, look, if we can just make it very, very difficult for Messi, the rest of the team is not set up to be cohesive. Therefore, we can, possibly have some success here. And it just, I felt like the change should have been made last summer after the epic failure at Anfield against Liverpool, ironically enough for me, in the Champions League semifinal when they lost 4-0 that night for an aggregate loss of 4-3 in the home Champions League semifinals. It was an issue for me, and I felt like, and I felt a lot of other Barcelona fans felt the same way. Like this is just enough is enough, and they didn't make the change. It was still stale. It was not going anywhere. I was at the Gamper Trophy match with my family this summer. The one main preseason match Barcelona plays every summer at home before the start of the season. They invite in a team from somewhere else around the world to play. It's technically a friendly, but it's a night where they introduce the club and they introduce the coaching staff, and it's kind of a celebration of last season and a look forward to the current season. It's a cool night to be at the Camp Nou and part of a match. And when Valverde was announced, I mean, there was. I mean, you couldn't deny the fact there were boos in the stadium. Other players got big cheers. Valverde, there was some boos. There was kind of some polite clapping, but there was not a ton of celebration of Valverde. And I mean, no disrespect to the man. He seems like a great guy. Everything I've read about him says that he is a, top-notch guy on a personal level. I mean, it seems like you can't do much better than that guy. But he just wasn't the right fit for the club and the ethos and, the core values and principles of play of the club. He just didn't fit. And so the lack of positional play in his coaching style and everything it kept showing with each week. To me, we were just farther and farther away. Everything was stale. Everything was dull. Performances weren't good. It wasn't enjoyable to watch. Kids started picking up on this. And finally, they make the change last Monday. A week ago today, he held his last training session and then was called into the office and said, hey, pack your stuff. We're moving on. And they bring in Quique Setien, who is not Xavi Hernandez. He's not an up-and-coming young manager. This guy's been around the block a time or two in terms of his age. He's in his 60s, early 60s, 61, I believe. And he came in and just immediately just said, "Hey, look, we are getting back to Cruyff, Pep, positional play principles." First day in charge on Tuesday, had 2 training sessions. Wednesday, the players were supposed to have off on Valverde's schedule. He was like, "Nope, we're training 11 a.m. on Wednesday," and just every day was building. And then you come out and you watch yesterday's match, where they had around like 80% possession, beautiful play in the midfield, connecting all over the field, with the ball, was dropping 3 in the back line and keeping 4 in attack. Messi was roaming around. It looked like a version of Barcelona of old, not identical, but same principles at play. And the team started to come to life, especially in the second half when Frankie de Jong was out on red card suspension. So yesterday he was unavailable. So the game started with Rakitic and Arturo Vidal ahead of Busquets, and that wasn't great. Not a fan of either of those guys at Barcelona. I think they would fit in other places, but just not the right fits. And so in the second half, Riqui Puig, a player who Valverde would not even look at, a 20-year-old that was playing with Barca B, but he is a quintessential Barcelona midfielder. And they called him in, called him up to the first team squad, said, "You're training with us." Put him on the match day roster. He's on the bench, comes into the game, and immediately you're like, yes, this looks like a Barcelona midfielder. Started connecting play, and was vital to the only goal of the game. Messi scored 1-0 victory, dominating performance, dominating possession. And then later, Arthur, coming back from injury, was brought in. And when Arthur came in, along with Riqui Puig and Busquets, Barcelona was just, they were like a boa constrictor, just, choking the life, out of Granada yesterday. And just as a midfield, it was just an engine, and it was like, we're getting back. It was not perfect. I mean, the attacking sequence, all those things were rusty, and you could tell players are still figuring some things out. But like what they were trying to do yesterday was gorgeous, and so I was very, very, very pleased with that. That was the first time in a long time that it was fun to watch Barcelona again. And for that, I am grateful to Kike Setien for his work last week, and what I hope to continue to see in his work going forward. The impact of a manager is a very real thing, and Barca bringing him in was not just about winning La Liga, but doing it in a beautiful way. That's a next level standard. Get into the core of what it means to be a club and principles of play and philosophy. In Barcelona, we're trying to get back home, and it seemed like yesterday they took major steps in the right direction. Speaking of taking a step in the right direction, if you have not already, I encourage you to go to ductigbrand.com, DUKTIG brand.com. Use promo code DWShow. You'll get 10% off of your order. But take a step in the right direction. If you're a coach, you could get some valuable help there by getting a coaching notebook. They've got tools and resources for players, goalkeepers, apparel. Check it out at ductigbrand.com, DUKTIG brand.com. Use promo code DWShow, and you will get 10% off of your next order at ductigbrand.com. We'll be right back after this. this morning? I hope you're doing well. Welcome back to the show. Thanks for tuning in on this Monday morning. As I told you at the top of the show, after the break, which is right now, we are getting into some macro level issues as to why American soccer isn't better, bigger, more profitable, etc. than it is. So first and foremost, Jurgen Klinsmann, years before he took over the job as the technical director and head coach of the U.S. men's national team, he said in coverage of a World Cup, I believe it was back in 2010. At the 2010 World Cup, he was a commentator, and he said on air that he felt that the American soccer pyramid is upside down and backwards. And just for anyone watching, maybe you're a coach, a young coach, maybe you're a dad, you don't really kind of zoom out of where you are. You know, you're just busy coaching, you're busy working, you're busy doing your job, and that's cool. But if you're curious as to what Klinsmann meant about an upside down pyramid and backwards, and we've got all this out of order around the world, the leagues that you see on television, the Premier League, La Liga, Bundesliga, Serie A, Ligue 1, Eredivisie, all the leagues that you see down in Brazil, in Argentina, Mexico, Liga MX, all of these leagues are the top league in the country. All right. So if you want to think of this in American sports, there's these leagues are the NFL of soccer in their country. They are the NBA. They are Major League Baseball. They are the NHL. What is different about all of those leagues and all of those countries compared to the United States is that they are the top league, but they are connected to all of the leagues below them. And they are connected in a way that is different than the way, say, Major League Baseball is connected to minor league baseball. Minor league baseball is a setup that is, dealing with farm teams of, in soccer terms, would be a first team. And that is just not what we're looking at around the world. You have independent teams all around the world that are playing in these lower leagues than the top league. However, these leagues around the world are connected. And by connected, what I mean is if you finish first, second, sometimes third, you get to move up the next season and play in a bigger league, in a better league, until eventually you reach the top league. So in England, when you win, you might be a small club, in over time, you could win your way all the way up to the Premier League. You don't pay an expansion fee. You don't buy your way in with territorial rights. You don't make a bid to win a lottery to get in. You don't get voted on to get in. You win on the field. You prove you can pay your bills. You play in the next league up. As a result of that type of system, things get connected as well from a revenue standpoint. Now, in some countries, it's better than others in how they distribute and share that revenue. But nevertheless, revenue gets shared down the pyramid. television revenue, sponsorship revenue comes in and gets shared down the rest of the system of connected leagues. And it does so in different ways. It does so in terms of prize money. It does so in terms of the way players are purchased from one team to get added to your team, and clubs are making money that way. It also does in terms of television rights and money's distributed. And when teams don't do well and they get what's called relegated down to a lower league, they typically get what they call parachute payments, where they get some help on the way down so that it's not a financial calamity for the club. And in that is a right side up pyramid. In America, it's backwards, because over there in South America, Central America, in Europe, kids pay a little bit of money to join a club and play. Usually, you take an amateur side in Amsterdam, and it might be 200, 250 euros for the entire year to play. You compare that to the United States, and you may be paying for some of the high-level amateur teams in terms of where they are sanctioned high-level amateur teams in America. You may be looking at $2,500, $5,000 or more dollars a year for your kid to play. You're talking about sometimes 10 times or more that a family is putting out. And that's what Jurgen Klinsmann means. At the same time, our professional players are locked into a system where they cannot maximize their opportunities to earn revenue. So you have players in Europe that can make really good money as a professional player, and you have guys here playing in what's called the top league, Major League Soccer, who are earning less than $100,000 a year. When you compare that to the NBA, when you compare that to the NFL, Major League Baseball, and the NHL, and you look at Major League Soccer, and you look at the way it's constructed, and then you also compare Major League Soccer to the way top leagues are run around the world, you start to see that the league itself is probably at best a second-tier league, more likely a third-tier league, because of the financial constraints it's placed on itself. So you have this closed system that's not connected to any leagues beneath it. You have a youth system that extorts families without having to do anything for their kids, except give them the opportunity to play. And that's it. They don't have to guarantee that if you pay this money, we guarantee your kid will be pro. We guarantee your kid will get a college scholarship. They just say, hey, we're going to provide programming. You're going to pay us a massive amount of money over time, and we don't have to give you any guarantees at the end, except that you got to be a part of our program. And that is why Jurgen Klinsmann said things are upside down and backwards. And when we get back after this break, we're going to get into the next piece of this, which is the proposals and bylaws and some of the macro level issues facing U.S. soccer, and what we really need to do to really start seeing improvements and changes at a federation level. Speaking of changes, you could be a part of a really cool change by going to charitywater.org. Charitywater.org is an organization that provides clean drinking water to people all over the world. And you can be part of that story by going to charitywater.org today. We'll be right back after this.
no one, no man, no woman, no child should ever have to drink green water with bugs, with algae, with disease in it. Bad water and a lack of toilets kills more people than all the wars in the world. We know how to bring clean drinking water right now to every single person on earth. And when you can bring water into communities, it truly transforms them. It changes everything. Or you could know that you'd made a difference. You could know that you had truly impacted the life of a family, of a community, of a region. There was either clean water or there wasn't. We believe in a world where every single person has clean and safe water to drink, and we will continue fighting until that happens.
Welcome back to the show. Thanks for watching on this Monday morning. As we've been talking about right before the break, just some of the macro level overview of where we are as a system and what Jurgen Klinsmann described about 10 years ago as our upside down and backwards pyramid, where you have families paying all of this money for their kids to play, and then you have our professional teams who are paying their players very little. This is backwards to the way the rest of the world does it. And as a byproduct, what happens is sporting merit, which is the core ethos of a connected system of leagues, meaning that what you do on the field matters. You get rewarded for it. It invites in more revenue, more resources, more opportunities for players, for clubs. In that kind of setup, you have revenues coming and distributing and being shared down the pyramid, whereas in the United States, all of your money stays wherever it is in the pyramid. So if money comes to MLS, they have no obligation to share it with anyone else. They just keep it for themselves. Then, if you have money in a youth club, they have no obligation to share it with Major League Soccer. So you have all of these, what I call silos. These organizations, these leagues, these clubs that are all on their own. Everybody's fighting for themselves. Everyone's trying to figure things out. And as a result, everything is upside down and backwards. There's no pressure to develop players. There is pressure to keep families happy. If you're a youth pay-to-play soccer club, you don't have to prove your value. You just need the right badges next to your club's name or to your name as a coach, and that is able to help you unlock the right doors to higher profile positions, more pay, etc. But it doesn't mean that you've actually done great work. If you look at our youth national teams, it's not about finding the best coaches. If you look at our men's and women's national teams, it is not predicated on finding the best coaches. It's all about whoever they want in place. There's not a system of accountability to the federation where if the fans were unhappy with the job a coach or those who pick the coach, there's not a system that holds those people accountable. Therefore, they could do and can do and do whatever they want to. So in light of all of that, the upside down, backwards pyramid, disconnected leagues, where we have everything kind of separated and siloed off from one another. You just run your own programming, try to run it as best you can, do what you can for yourself. In that kind of context, we have a federation that has abdicated its massive and major and primary responsibility, which is to lead. And instead, they have married themselves to Major League Soccer, and they have done so officially for about 18 years. But it goes beyond that. It goes to back to unofficially the very inception of the league. Had the federation president part of the formation of Major League Soccer as a project. So the federation de facto from the very beginning has been in bed with Major League Soccer. And that means that U.S. Soccer has subsidized MLS for the entirety of its existence. It has propped it up with rules, with favors, with sanctioning, and with money. And they continue to do so now, and they don't share it. They only share that money with Major League Soccer. They don't even share it with the NWSL. They only share federation money, subsidies that are part of this Soccer United Marketing, which is a company owned by Major League Soccer owner-operators. They only share that money between the federation and MLS. And so what we have is a setup where a federation isn't held accountable, doesn't lead. We have an upside down backwards pyramid, and everything's disconnected. Competing interests, conflicts everywhere, including on the board of directors, where people have influence over their own paychecks. Don Garber, a couple of years ago, earned a double-digit million. So you're talking, about an 8-figure sum bonus for himself, and yet that bonus is directly tied to his work on the board of directors of U.S. Soccer, CEO of Soccer United Marketing, and commissioner of Major League Soccer. And you're going, there's nothing wrong here? It is absurd. And so in light of all that, West Virginia and Illinois Adult Soccer have submitted proposals for policies as well as bylaw amendments to improve the governance, transparency, and accountability of the federation. As a member organization, it is within their rights to do so. And the policies and bylaws are not meant to conflict with present bylaws and policies as much as they are additions to bylaws and policies. And the primary role of the Rules Committee within the bylaws is to make sure that there are no conflicts. And then these things should go up for a vote at the annual general meeting coming up in Nashville, Tennessee in February. But instead, what has happened is the board of directors, who has the right and ability to vote themselves on policy proposals, not on bylaws, but on policy proposals, have rejected the West Virginia policy and sent it back and said, we're going to try to handle this ourselves. We don't like the way you wrote your policy proposal, so we're going to try to handle it ourselves. Don't worry about submitting another policy proposal. And that policy proposal had to do with the inequity of voting power within the professional council. specifically related to gender discrimination. So what West Virginia looked at is they saw that at the 2018 presidential election, Major League Soccer had nearly 60% of the professional council's votes by themselves. 60%. That translates into nearly 15% of the overall vote of all U.S. soccer members in the election. That is the single most powerful vote by any organization in the election. The only group that's not an official organization, but is a council similar to the professional council that has the ability to place a solitary vote is the Athlete Council, which gets about 20% of the overall vote. And that is required by law, not U.S. soccer law, by United States government law called the Ted Stevens Act. So setting aside the Athlete Council, which is mandated by law, and they've still been in violation of, as you could see in Hope Solo, as well as the U.S. women's national team's challenges as well, but especially in Hope Solo's cases, you would see how U.S. soccer has even been in violation of federal law. Setting aside that, the single most powerful organization from a voting standpoint within the professional council, but also within the U.S. soccer membership, is Major League Soccer. And they have nearly 60% in that election of the vote of the professional council. They are designated as a Division I professional men's soccer league. Compare that to the Division I women's professional soccer league, which got less voting power than the men's second division professional soccer league, the USL Championship, and at that time, the NASL, which got even less than the NWSL, which only had like 1.6 or something. So you had the USL that had about 20% of the professional council's votes, which equal to about 5% of the overall election. And the NWSL had just slightly less than that. So what West Virginia said is, this is wrong. If you've got a professional league that is designated, Division I men's, if they get 10%, then the women's professional first division should get 10%. If Major League Soccer gets 15, then the NWSL should get 15. And if there is a women's professional league that's Division II, it should get the same exact voting percentage as the men's Division II league in the USL Championship, so on and so forth. To me, that is a completely legitimate argument. I see no issues with it. The board kicked it out, claiming that the policy as submitted was too confusing. And we're basically just looking for any excuse to try to thwart the effort, and claimed through conversations with West Virginia that they were going to try to handle it internally. And I don't trust them, and no one should trust the Federation. We're in this position already where you don't have that documented. So therefore, what did they do? They resubmitted an even clear and direct policy to accompany the bylaws to make it clear that if Major League Soccer gets, that 10%, then so does the NWSL. And in that policy, that should go forward for a vote. and the entire general membership, the National Council at the AGM, should have the opportunity to to have that voted on and hopefully voted in. So it shouldn't be a problem at all for that vote to go through and for those things to take place. Now, Illinois put forth policy in a bylaw proposal. Bylaw 109 was an amendment. And bylaw 109, if you were to get into U.S. soccer bylaws, is a bylaw of definitions. It's one of the most boring bylaws in the federation's bylaws. And it's just line after line of definition. But Bylaw 109 basically changes slightly the definition of the professional league standards. They are referenced in Bylaw 109, and it basically says as directed by the board. And what Bylaw 109 does, it says as published in the United States Soccer Federation Policy Manual and approved by the National Council. The main difference here is that they are published as a public policy in the United States Soccer Federation Policy Manual. And in order to do that by procedure, that means they have to be approved by the National Council, because that's the way the bylaws and the voting structure works. If you have a policy that right now is in litigation because you've been doing it underhanded for years and are accused of antitrust violations because you have kept it from being overseen, kept it from being held accountable so that you could do shading dealings within yourself by having MLS members on the board. As a matter of fact, an MLS employee on the payroll of Major League Soccer as your president of your federation while these said rules were in place, written, amended, altered, etc. It makes sense to give cover to the federation by publishing these for everyone to see and standardize the process to protect the federation from future litigation. Now, this makes common sense to common people. You look at the policies and you go, well, yeah. If you're going to have policies regarding how we spend money, it should be published for everyone to see. It should go through an approval process so that everything is in the light. Everything's governed and there's transparency. These are some of the things that Carlos Cordero said he was going to do, has not done. He's talked a lot. He's talked about committees. He's put a few people in place here and there. But he's not actually done the transparency work that he talked about. Real transparency is to put things into the light and put them into the light in a way where they are held accountable and that there is a guardrail system that keeps the federation from getting itself into trouble. In the case of government, in the United States government, that is called the Constitution. In the case of U.S. Soccer, that is their bylaws and their policy manual. When you don't publish your bidding and financial spending and accountability procedures and policies in your policy manual or in your bylaws, it means that anyone can go rogue and very few can find out about it. When you publish your professional league standards outside of your policy manual and bylaws, it means that your board of directors can do shady dealings, internal dealings that favor one over another without any sense of accountability, and you cannot be held accountable, and there is no transparency in the process. When this bylaw and policy was put forth to the federation, it was done so in a way to standardize the process. That also included standardizing the actual professional league standards, which if you were to read them, there are a bunch of discrepancies in the professional league standards. For example, every professional league gives clubs and or the league, the teams in the league, for example, 3 years, that the clubs have to prove viability for 3 years. So if you're a club and you're getting sanctioned as Division II, you have to show that you have operational capacity for 3 years. You can pay your bills for 3 years. Except for Major League Soccer, where they changed that rule to say 5 years. Everyone else is 3. They made Major League Soccer 5. Why? To non-standardize the process. To give Major League Soccer extra protections. Proof, yet again, of picking winners and losers. We're in bed with them. We're going to protect them. So we're going to put these rules in our own committee. They're going to write the rules or change the rules. Wink, wink, based on what we want. Everybody else is going to deal with them. And then we're going to act like, I don't know what the problem is. I don't know why these clubs and leagues are having issues. So here's what the Federation said to standardizing the rules, streamlining the rules, and making things very simple and clear for all clubs and leagues. As an initial matter, the Rules Committee notes that the professional league standards are subject of pending litigation with the NASL, formerly a Division II men's professional league and member of U.S. Soccer. The proposed amendment to Bylaw 109 and proposed Policy 202-4, which is a new policy because the professional league standards are not published as a policy in the policy manual right now. So Policy 202-4 is a new policy that is simply the professional league standards published with those slight alterations to standardize them for all leagues. And as well, it is a bylaw change amendment to that definition that I mentioned a minute ago. The proposed amendment to Bylaw 109 and proposed Policy 202-4 could impact the Federation in the pending litigation. Therefore, the Rules Committee consulted with outside counsel regarding the drafting of this recommendation. Now, that there is an issue to me that is a smoking gun problem. You're going to try to hide behind the fact that changes to the bylaw and policy could impact the Federation in pending litigation. I mean, anything could impact pending litigation. The wrong hire, anything, any change of a rule. I mean, that's an excuse. It's a joke. Secondly, the Rules Committee understands that professional league standards were initially adopted by the Board of Directors in 1995 to promote the growth and development of soccer in the United States. The PLS have been revised 3 times by the Board of Directors, 2008, 10, and 14. Each time, the board appointed or utilized a task force consisting of experts, the Professional League Standards Task Force, to review and draft the revisions. Let me add this that they didn't put there. President of U.S. Soccer, Sunil Gulati, on the payroll of Major League Soccer, at the same time, oversaw the changes in 2008, 10, and 14. Tell me there's no conflict there. After revisions were proposed by the Professional League Standards Task Force, The proposed revisions were sent by U.S. Soccer to the professional leagues for review and comment. The comments from the professional leagues were circulated to the Professional League Standards Task Force, which then reviewed the comments and made determinations as to whether any changes to the proposed revisions based on those comments were warranted. Thereafter, the board reviewed the final proposed revisions to the Professional League Standards, and the disinterested members of the board, i.e. those members who did not have an affiliation with a professional league, voted to adopt the amended Professional League Standards. The Rules Committee does not believe that any of the steps above have been completed with regards to the changes to the proposed Policy 202-4. Nor is there any bylaw or policy in place that directs the board of directors to do that. That is just something they did. They've made up a policy that's not in the bylaws or policy manual. And then they're trying to say, well, this proposed policy didn't go through a process that isn't even warranted or required. This is all smokescreen garbage. In addition, the proposed amendments to Bylaw 109 would make the National Council responsible for changing the professional league standards. The National Council includes the Professional Council, and there's no mechanism for recusal of members of the National Council under Robert's Rules or U.S. Soccer's bylaws. As noted above, the Rules Committee consulted with outside counsel for the Federation. Outside counsel recommended that no action be taken on this proposed amendment at this time due to pending litigation. So here's what's going on. They are trying desperately to prevent the National Council from voting in these changes. They are scared to death that the board can no longer railroad Major League Soccer's competitors. This freaks them out. They do not want accountability. They do not want transparency. They do not want proper governance. There is no reason in the bylaws or policy manual, as they note it. There is no reason for the Professional Council not to have a say and a vote on the standards as a policy. Nor should they be unable and disallowed from having a vote on the standards, because a policy amendment or new policy getting voted in requires a vote of 50% plus one. The collective professional council only has 25.8% of the overall vote. It would still take another 25% to get to 50% plus one to see any changes voted in. And there should be no reason why the Professional Council shouldn't have a vote in that process. These are rules that govern them in the same way that there are rules voted in all of the time and that are existing within the policy manual and the bylaws that govern youth soccer, adult amateur soccer, how coaches and referees are handled. Why would we not allow the professional leagues the same courtesy? This is all a joke. This is the Federation having a quote-unquote outside counsel, unnamed. That's like sources say in politics. Unless they're named, are they really sources or are they just rumors? Outside counsel saying, well, this would be risky for the Federation to change. No, this would actually help the Federation in their litigation. You want to know why? So, if they are at risk of losing, which some say they are with the NASL, with the antitrust piece, this would actually limit or lower possible damages, because the National Council would have approved as an overall organization. They would have taken it away from an arbitrary process, which they themselves admit in this response on paper that our process is arbitrary. It is made up by the board. It has not been approved by the National Council. It is not in our bylaws. It is not in our policy manual. We do whatever we want. It would actually behoove them to now publish these policies as well as the bylaw change to protect them in case they are found wanting in their case with the NASL. Secondly, it would provide them protection at a board level, because now you couldn't go after board members for going rogue. For a Sunil Gulati on the payroll of Major League Soccer overseeing changes to rules that makes it difficult for his competitors. Now you couldn't make that accusation. Why? Because now the National Council, the membership of the federation, the entire organization voted on it. It's in a policy manual that follows procedures. Transparency, accountability. It actually helps U.S. soccer. This is all a smokescreen and a joke. And the policy that was submitted for the professional league standards that standardize those rules. Alexi Lawless said, I wouldn't mind loosening some of the rules. The actual policies that are there standardizes the verbiage. And the only main area where you might could make the argument that it's loosening the rules is in the area where you have the deletion of one set of ownership type for clubs. Meaning right now you have to have an owner worth $40 million outside of their ownership stake in the club and their personal primary residence worth $40 million, and an ownership group collectively worth at least $70 million to own and operate a first division club in the men's Division I. It eliminates that clause, and it simply just says you have to prove that you can pay your bills for 3 years. It's America. There are multiple ways to put an ownership group together. You could have 50 guys, each worth $20 million, who could easily, collectively operate a first division club, but they would be prohibited in the way that U.S. Soccer has their rules written. So that provision was absurd. So it wasn't saying, hey, we're going to lower the barriers to operations. We were just saying, hey, if you read that, it's saying you take out that ownership piece and you say, it doesn't really matter what your ownership structure is. What matters is, can you prove that your club's viable? If you're Rocco and Camiso and you own the Cosmos and you're worth $10 billion, if you want to put your net worth down as your ability to pay the bills, that's fine. But if you're another club and you can show that you've got operational funds in the bank for 3 years, that's fine too. And you might be only worth $100 million or $50 million or $25 million, but the club can prove it can pay its bills for 3 years. What that does is invite innovation, investment, resources into the game. And it standardizes a process throughout the leagues. What this rebuttal, is a joke. And anyone who says, oh, just build a better mousetrap, like Alexi Lawless says, is being disingenuous, because this kind of junk right here, where an MLS employee is overseeing the alterations to rules that govern his paycheck, and you say, build a better mousetrap, it's easy, that's a joke. And it should not be listened to. It should not be followed. These rules, these policies and bylaws should go before the National Council. And if the National Council says we don't like the way these are written or we want some changes or whatever, fine. But it should go up to a vote. And the Rules Committee and the board should not be trying to get in the way. It should allow its members to have a voice because it is a member organization and they should have a voice in a vote. Period. Plain and simple. Thanks for watching the show today. Thanks for tuning in. As always, appreciate the support, the viewership, etc. As always, you can watch the show on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and some other platforms like my website, danielworkman.com. Catch me on Twitter or Instagram at Daniel Workman. Hope you have a great day. I will see you again tomorrow.